You step off the paved road, and the air immediately changes texture, becoming thicker, heavier, and colder against the back of your neck. The sounds of the city of Cluj-Napoca, which were just audible a moment ago, are severed as if someone has closed a heavy soundproof door behind you. Instinct tells you to turn back, to return to the safety of the open field, but curiosity pulls you in. You walk deeper into the shade, and you notice the first sign that biology here has gone wrong. The trees. They don't reach for the light. They twist in agony, their trunks forming perfect spirals, bending at 90-degree angles as if some colossal, invisible hand had wrung them out like wet rags. You realize, with a creeping coldness in your stomach, that you are walking through a graveyard of timber that seems frozen in the middle of a convulsion. This is the Hoia Baciu Forest, and you are already being watched. And the most unnerving part is that it doesn't behave the same way twice. What one person experiences here, another will deny with complete sincerity. This tangled patch of woodland in Transylvania has earned a reputation that eclipses its modest size, often referred to by paranormal enthusiasts as the Bermuda Triangle of Romania. While such titles can often feel like hyperbolic tourist traps, the history of Hoia Baciu suggests something far more unsettling than mere marketing. Local legends dating back centuries warn that those who enter the forest are liable to never return, or if they do, they return changed, carrying with them a sickness of the soul or the body that doctors cannot diagnose. The fear here is not ancient history. It is a living, breathing thing that has evolved alongside the local population. For generations, the people of Cluj, a city that borders the forest's edge, refused to venture into the trees, regarding the area as cursed ground where the veil between worlds is dangerously thin. This wasn't merely superstition born of ignorance, but a survival mechanism honed by observation. They saw strange lights dancing above the canopy long before the term UFO entered the cultural lexicon, and they heard the cries of the lost when the woods were empty. Even today, despite the skepticism of the modern age, you will find taxi drivers in Cluj who will take you to the edge of the woods, but refuse, under any circumstances, to turn their engines off or step out of the car. They know that some boundaries should not be crossed. The modern obsession with the forest, however, did not begin with a ghost story, but with a man of science. In the early 1950s, a biologist named Alexandru Sift began a lifelong relationship with the woods that would eventually consume him. Sift was not a mystic seeking fame. He was a rigorous academic, initially drawn to the forest to study its botanical mutations. He wanted to understand why the vegetation grew in such grotesque and spiraling forms, defying the natural laws of phototropism. But as Sift spent his days and nights among the twisted trunks, his focus shifted. He began to report a sensation that is now the hallmark of the Hoia Baciu experience: the feeling of being constantly observed by 1,000 unseen eyes. He described a heavy and prickly heat that would wash over him, followed by sudden bone-deep chills. Determined to capture the source of this unease, Sift began photographing what appeared to be empty spaces. When he developed the plates in his darkroom, the results were terrifying. The chemicals revealed what the naked eye had missed. His photographs were crowded with shadows. He captured amorphous shapes standing next to trees, glowing orbs floating with intelligent purpose, and complex, semi-translucent figures that seemed to be mimicking human forms. Sift spent decades cataloging these phenomena, amassing a library of thousands of images that documented a reality overlapping our own. The tragedy of Alexandru Sift is not just in what he saw, but in what was lost once he no longer had the power to protect it. After his death in 1993, the vast majority of his life's work mysteriously vanished. Some say they were stolen by opportunists. Others suggest a more sinister erasure, a deliberate attempt by unknown actors to suppress the evidence he had gathered. All that remains are fragments of a legacy, suggesting that Sift had peered too deeply into the abyss, and the abyss had decided to keep his secrets. While Sift worked in the shadows, the forest forced itself onto the world stage on a humid afternoon in August 1968. Romania was deep in the grip of a communist regime that aggressively enforced atheism and materialism. To speak of UFOs, spirits, or the paranormal was to risk being labeled mentally unstable, or a subverter of the state. It was a dangerous time to see something impossible. Emil Barnea, a military technician, had no interest in politics or ghosts when he entered the forest for a weekend break with his girlfriend and a couple of friends. They were looking for relaxation, seeking a break from the rigid structures of city life. But shortly after noon, the silence of the woods was shattered not by sound, but by presence. Barnea's companion shouted, pointing frantically toward the canopy. He grabbed his camera and looked up. Hovering silently above the tree line was a large, metallic disc. It was gleaming silver in the sun, moving with a fluid, impossible grace that defied all known aerodynamics of the era. It didn't bank or turn like a plane, it shifted positions instantly. Barnea managed to snap a series of photographs, images that would become some of the clearest depictions of a UFO ever captured. The object suddenly accelerated, shooting straight up into the stratosphere with a burst of light, vanishing entirely. When Barnea developed the photos, they showed the craft in undeniable detail. The authenticity of these images was later verified by the director of the Cluj Observatory and subsequently by international researchers, including those in France and the United States. They found no evidence of double exposure or manipulation. Barnea paid the price for his honesty. In a regime that demanded conformity, he was ostracized, fired from his job, and subjected to interrogation. Yet, until his dying day, he never recanted. He accepted the ruin of his social standing rather than deny the reality of what he saw above those twisted trees. His testimony changed the narrative of Hoia Baciu forever. It was no longer just a haunted wood, but a cosmic intersection, a place where the traffic of the universe converged. There is one place in Hoia Baciu where even skeptics stop improvising explanations, because the forest isn't merely strange there, it becomes selective. If you walk deep enough, pushing past the dense undergrowth and the claustrophobic canopy, you will eventually stumble into the round clearing. This is the heart of the nightmare. It is a near-perfect circle of land where the forest simply stops. Step inside the circle, the change is visceral. The air here is stagnant, devoid of the scent of pine. It smells of copper and ozone. Scientists have analyzed the soil here for radiation and heavy metals, but the chemistry is almost identical to the Earth 10 meters away in the thicket. And yet the forest refuses to enter. While the clearing is carpeted in grass, not a single tree has taken root here for centuries. It is a biological void in the middle of a dense woodland. This is where the physical toll of the forest becomes aggressive. Visitors who linger in the round clearing often report sudden, debilitating symptoms, migraines that strike like a hammer blow, nausea that doubles them over, severe anxiety attacks that seem to have no trigger. There are documented accounts of people suffering burns on their skin, red welts appearing beneath their clothes as if they have been exposed to high-intensity radiation or an acidic mist. Electronic devices die instant deaths here. Fresh batteries drain in seconds, cameras shutter and jam, drones lose connection and drop out of the sky. It is as if the clearing is a massive battery that feeds on any energy brought into it. Some researchers propose that the clearing is a portal, a thin spot in the dimensional fabric where magnetic fields fluctuate wildly, causing havoc on the human nervous system and digital technology alike. Standing here, you don't feel like you are in nature. You feel like you are in a sterile containment room, waiting for an experiment to begin. The physical symptoms are disturbing, but the psychological effects of Hoia Baciu are what truly linger in the mind. The folklore of the region is rife with stories of time distortion, narratives that drift between legend and documented police reports. There is a famous account, passed down through local oral history, of a shepherd and his flock of 200 sheep. He drove them into the forest, intending to take a shortcut to a pasture on the other side. The moment they crossed the tree line, they were swallowed. No search party ever found a trace. No wool, no bones, no shepherd's crook. It was as if they had walked off the edge of the map. While the shepherd's tale reads like a parable, the story of the 5-year-old girl is far more specific and unsettling. The account claims that a young girl wandered into the woods and vanished. Her parents, The police and volunteers scoured the forest for weeks, but they found nothing. They grieved, accepted their loss, and moved on. 5 years later, the girl reportedly walked out of the forest, wearing the exact same clothes she had disappeared in, clean and untattered. She looked exactly the same age as the day she left. To her, she had been gone for 10 minutes, while the world had aged 5 years. Whether these specific stories are literal facts or cultural metaphors for the forest's disorienting power, they speak to a verifiable phenomenon experienced by modern visitors: the loss of time. Hikers frequently report entering the woods for what feels like an hour, only to emerge and find that half a day has passed. This temporal slippage is often accompanied by migraines and a sense of confusion, as if the brain is struggling to reconcile the timeline of the forest with the timeline of the outside world. It suggests that Hoia Baciu may not just be a place on a map, but a distinct state of reality with its own internal clock. And it forces us to ask, where do these people go during those missing hours? And are they the same people when they return? Those who have spent the most time in Hoia Baciu often speak of the green mist. It is described not as weather, but as a substance, a thick, luminous vapor that rises suddenly from the ground, obscuring the path and muting sound. It is within this mist that the voices are heard. Reports of auditory hallucinations are common: a high-pitched ringing, the sound of women giggling, or the distinct noise of footsteps crunching on leaves directly behind you when no one is there. The locals attribute this to the ELA. In Romanian folklore, the ELA are not the benevolent fairies of Disney movies. They are powerful, seductive, and vindictive spirits who dance in circles by moonlight. To see them is to risk blindness or madness. To step into their circle is to be cursed. Investigators argue that the seduction of the ELA aligns with the modern phenomenon of the call of the void. Many visitors report a sudden, overwhelming urge to walk deeper into the woods, to leave the path and lose themselves in the darkest thickets. It is a compulsion that feels external, like a command whispered directly into the brain. It takes immense willpower to turn around and walk back toward the safety of the road. Skeptics will always look for rational explanations. They will cite infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that can cause hallucinations and dread. They will mention the magnetic anomalies that can mess with the temporal lobes of the brain. But these theories struggle to explain the physical violence of the forest. This is when the story becomes tactile. We are not just talking about feelings, we are talking about injuries. There are countless reports of people emerging from Hoia Baciu with scratches on their bodies. These are not jagged tears from thorns or branches. They are distinct, parallel red welts, often in sets of 3, resembling claw marks. They appear on backs, stomachs, and arms, often in places that were covered by thick jackets. One televised investigation famously captured a presenter being knocked off his feet by an invisible force. He lifted his shirt to reveal fresh, bleeding scratches that appeared in real time. This aggression suggests that whatever resides in the forest is not merely a residual haunting, repeating a loop of the past. It is an active intelligence. It can touch, it can push, and it can hurt. It knows you are there, and it doesn't like it. The horror of Hoia Baciu is not just in the experience of the forest, it's in the aftermath. Many visitors report that the heavy feeling follows them home. They experience nightmares for weeks, vivid dreams of twisted trees and staring eyes. The silence of the forest seems to stain their memories, a lingering shadow that refuses to be scrubbed away by the safety of their living rooms. Hoia Baciu remains a defiance of our modern arrogance. We believe we have mapped every inch of this planet and that we have categorized every species and solved every mystery with our satellites and sensors. But this forest stands as a 3 square kilometers rebuttal to that certainty. Science has failed to explain the bent trees, the lights, and the dead soil. As you finally step back onto the pavement, leaving the dirt track behind, the relief is almost narcotic. The sounds of the modern world rush back in, the distant traffic, the wind, the noise of life. You check your phone. The battery is dead, but at least you are out. The forest does not ask for your belief. It does not care about your skepticism. It simply waits, ancient and patient, twisting in the dark. It waits for the next person brave enough or foolish enough to step off the road and into the silence. And as you turn your back on those trees, you can't help but wonder, are you leaving the forest, or are you simply taking a piece of it with you?